Namaste and greetings. I, Heer Lakhani, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav or Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Talk. We are gathered here today for the IMPRI 7th annual series of thematic deliberations and analysis of the Union Budget for the financial year 2026-27. As part of this series, we will be engaging in a panel discussion on employment, livelihoods, and the Union Budget 2026-27. This discussion is organized by the IMPRI Center for Work and Welfare (CWW) under the IMPRI Web Policy Talk series. I warmly welcome all of you to this insightful deliberation and thank you for tuning in. The chair and moderator is Professor Suchita Krishnaprasad ji, visiting professor IMPRI, former associate professor and head of the Department of Economics, Elphinstone College, Mumbai. Today's expert panelists include Mr. Sandeep Chachra ji, Executive Director, Action Aid Association, India and ex-co-chair, World Urban Campaign, UN Habitat Advisor, IMPRI. Ms. Amarjeet Kaur ji, General Secretary, All India Trade Union Congress, Mr. Udit Mishra ji, writer for the Explain page, The Indian Express, Professor S. Irudayarajan ji, Chair, International Institute for Migration and Development, India, Professor Randhir Singh Rathore ji, State Project Director, Haryana State Higher Education Council, Professor Praveen Jha ji, Professor, Economics, Chairperson, Center for Economic Studies and Planning, CESP, School of Social Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University. The conveners of the program are Dr. Simi Mehta ji and Dr. Arjun Kumar ji. To begin today's discussion, I am honored to invite Professor Suchita Krishnaprasad ji, Chair and Moderator, to share her opening remarks. We welcome you and over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Priyanka, and thank you so much, Professor Arjun Kumarji, for continuously allowing me to share my thoughts and learn from all the experts on the panel. I'm sure I'll be the one who will be gaining from this discussion. So, when we talk of India's budget, we are actually talking about the turnover, if you wish, of the fourth largest economy in the world. And amidst the tumultuous world, a GDP growth of around 7%, fiscal deficit of 4.3%, debt to GDP ratio estimated at 55.6% makes the macro picture of Indian economy truly impressive. By the way, for Singapore, this ratio is supposed to be 172%. Add to this revival of consumption expenditure and rising labor force participation rate, declining unemployment as per the data available, and control of food inflation, it reads like a great progress card, given the global uncertainties and geopolitical turmoil and the tariff tremors. On the other side of this happy numbers, however, are a few worrisome macro numbers. For example, our trade deficit in goods has been a matter of concern. There is a net trade surplus in services and remittances, but it is not enough to offset it. Consequently, our rupee continues to dwindle. India depends on foreign capital inflows to maintain a healthy balance of payment, and when they run dry, the rupee becomes unstable. The economic survey attributes this scenario to what is termed as strategic power gap. The strategic power gap index reflects the nation's ability to position itself globally through a network of networking in international relations. A currency, we are told, is likely to underperform because of a poor strategic power gap index. So, are we then a victim of geopolitics? The survey mourns what it calls as a paradox of 2025. To quote the survey on page number 8, India's strongest macroeconomic performance in decades has collided with global system that no longer rewards macroeconomic success with currency stability, capital inflows, and strategic insulation. And yet, of course, it is incredible that we have moved from a 23.9% contraction in GDP during the pandemic to where we stand at present. What have we done to reach here? If we take an overview of budgets since the pandemic, we see a pattern. A few things have been followed rather consistently in every budget. Number one, we have pushed the physical infrastructure to the next level, and that includes roads, railways, waterways, ports, and new airports. We have tried to create a policy framework to incentivize capex in private sector. Of course, it took a long time to pick up. We are told that recently the capex in private sector is slowly picking up. And the schemes such as PLI aim to push the exports in select industries. Each next budget, we are trying to extend that coverage of PLI. We have focused on MSMEs, which is a job generating sector, either through easier loans or by redefining the threshold limits to facilitate their further expansion. We have given special attention to specific sectors such as textile, apparels, leathers, and gems, etc. These sectors are, of course, valued for their ability to create more jobs and to earn foreign exchange at the same time. Creating clusters has been a strategy, and the growing number of textile parks are the result of this. Of course, the policy started from somewhere around 2005, if I'm not mistaken. Tourism has been another important sector which took a V-shaped recovery path after being severely hit during the lockdown. And each next budget has provided a greater detailed map of how the tourism should go. So we have temple towns and planning around temple towns and so on. The service sector has contributed significantly to the Indian economy, especially since the IT boom. But the global volatility and emergence of AI is now shifting that focus to electronics industry. In fact, electronics is a new IT according to some experts, and the budget 2026 has taken note of that shift. An outlay of 40,000 crores has been set aside for the Electronic Components Manufacturing Scheme, or ECMS, under the India Semiconductors Mission 2.0. Care has also been taken to strengthen the backward linkages by proposing creation of rare earth corridors, chemical parks, and data centers. A tax holiday announced for foreign companies setting up data centers until 2047 sounds lucrative, and it should attract more investors. However, there is also a question of data centers requiring electricity and water supply, which means that we will be locals might be losing out on that. How it affects the livelihood will be for us to see once these things start rolling out. India aims to emerge as a global drone hub by 2030, and the Drone Shakti mission looks forward to reducing the dependence on global supply chain. Last year, let me tell you, if you remember, we were planning to make toy making industry, India becoming the global hub of toy making industry. So there are certain words which keep getting repeated, global hub or, reducing dependence on supply chain. Whether we have actually succeeded to do that would be for us to see on the ground. A step towards green growth, we announced incentives for manufacturing and promoting the use of e-vehicles. There are other areas such as fisheries and agro-based industries. Last budget also spoke about promoting cooperatives in agriculture once again, but I skip all of them for the sake of brevity. Education, better skills, suitable training are, of course, the obvious areas of interest for any government, and more so for a country like India, which is known for its demographic dividend. So there have been more IITs set up in the recent budgets, more medical colleges and universities, etc. on the one hand, and on the other hand, there's a push to stimulate creative ability of and generating new innovative ideas. Here we have utter tinkering labs that aim at catching and grooming curious minds at school level. Last but not the least are the schemes to ease the living and uplift the livelihoods through schemes such as PM Awas Yojana, PM Swanidhi, PM Vishwakarma, and all those that combine the ease of doing business along with ease of living, if you like, with smart cities, which has now perhaps been revived in city economic region. So it sounds like a map which is taking us steadily towards a particular direction. What it does to the livelihoods and employments is for us to see. And above all, while we're doing all these things, boosting physical infrastructure and the rest of it, we have always kept an eye on fiscal prudence, which has been aided by monetization of assets. So, in fact, when the rest of the world was recommending helicopter money during COVID, we were still keeping an eye on fiscal prudence, and whether that has helped or harmed our people is for the panelists of today to uncover and unfold. So, how have all these efforts shaped up our labor markets, jobs, and livelihood? To provide an insight into the budget 2026 in terms of its emphasis on job creation, employment, employability among the youth, and probably, the climate effects that will be for later. May I now call upon Professor Praveen Jha to uh, express his views on the emphasis of the budget on job creation, employment, and employability, especially among the youth. Professor Jha.
Okay. Thank you so much. Now, let me make a couple of general remarks before I come to the focused issues. First, there have been broadly two kinds of reactions to the budget per se, budget 26-27, a more generous one, which sees this exercise as a modest, stay on course kind of exercise with no big bangs. A few sectoral and issue-specific calls have been made. As in the last several budgets, no dearth of promises and announcements, but in terms of anything substantive, concrete, etc., there is nothing to show for. So that would be the more generous kind of assessment that we have seen in the last 2 days in the press. The other extreme would be that it's a completely flat, non-event, ostrich-like approach, hiding from all the challenges that India confronts. So these are the two kinds of broad, let's say, extremes, and within that, then you can look for other kinds of responses as well. Before we make sense of either of these two very, very sharp kind of statements, it is obviously very important to make sense of the larger macro context, which Suchita was referring to. And let me start with what she talked about, GDP, for instance. Now, all of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the fact that GDP has been one of the most contested issues in the last roughly, let's say, 6-7 years or so. All this started with one of the advisors to the government, economic advisor, Professor Rajan, who also was governor of RBI after demitting the office. One of the statements that he made was that, this GDP estimate does not look appropriate. In fact, we probably have been growing at a rate which is at least 1.5% to maybe even 2% less than what the official numbers are. Lo and behold, the other advisor who had followed in the footsteps of Dr. Rajan, Arvind Subramaniam, he comes in and says that it should be halved. So if it is 7%, reduce it to 3.5%, right? Now, these are those who belong to the establishment, right? As soon as they demit office, soon after that, there are these very serious doubts being expressed on the most basic numbers, so to say, namely the GDP. More recently, if you look at IMF, which in fact questions the quality of India's statistics in general. So it is not only talking of only GDP, but casts very serious doubts on whether we can rely on these numbers at all. You have a very recent estimate from one of our only two Nobel laureates from India in economics, Abhijit Banerjee, and he says that the numbers are a mystery. We can't quite make sense of it. Is it a mystery? Is it a mystique? What is it? Yeah, so it just becomes quite problematic, right? Now, that's the backdrop. Now, these are voices which are very much within the establishment. All the numbers that I mentioned in the last minute or so coming from economists and institutions, which are very, very mainstream. So it's not coming from some radical kind of stream of left-wing criticism and so on. But so that is where we are. In fact, if you look at the latest economic survey, what does it tell us? It's a bit of a mystery that if this is indeed our GDP growth rate, why are investors exiting in hordes? I mean, they're just voting with their feet. I mean, this is my phrase, not economic survey's phrase, right? It also says that it is indeed a mystery that rupee seems to be the most underperforming currency.
Yes.
In, certainly in Asia and a large part of the developing world and so on. RBI, its most recent statement, it says that the current savings ratios are at a multi-decade low level, right? Consumption is really muted. Inequality has ballooned. We are talking of highest inequality in almost 100 years or so. Piketty's report 2025, which became talk of the town. If you look at revenue and expenditure as a ratio of GDP, Rathin Roy, a very recent number that he has given us, is that both these are stagnant between 2016-17 and 25-26, roughly around 9.5 to 10% is the ratio of revenues, and expenditure somewhere around 12.7 to 13% or so. Right? Now, these are the standard macro kind of estimates, which then tells you that something is very worrisome about our economic health. On top of that, if you go into sectors and so on, everybody keeps talking about it, that crisis in rural economy continues to deepen. If you look at all the PLFS estimates recently, all the other estimates that are relevant from this point of view, you find that real wages have been more or less stagnant for almost a decade or so, right, in rural areas. Now, these indeed are extremely, extremely worrisome numbers. If you look at research and development expenditure for agriculture, rural economy, again, there is a kind of compression there and so on. Now, that's the broader macro picture. Within that, then, what happens to resource mobilization? How do you, in a stagnant economy, how do you hope for increasing the resource envelope? There are only two ways. Either there are higher taxes, or you have to take recourse to higher deficits, right? Now, as we know from 2019 onward, the whole question of deficit has become anathema, increasing the deficits and so on. The so-called sound finance has become the rule, right? That it should not. In fact, this has been the case since FRBM was adopted 2003 and so on. So since then on, there have been some violations of that every once in a while, but especially in the last decade or so, except for the COVID period when the deficit really expanded, we have stuck to this sound finance kind of story. So if that be the case, then clearly there is no way that we can raise resources. Right? We have decided not to increase taxes. 2019 and then 2025, we had very clear, more or less unanimous decision within the government establishment that taxes have to be reduced. Right? Now, with both those reductions then, there is no way in the foreseeable future that you can see any increase in taxes. Now, if that is the case, and if you're sticking to sound finance, where are we going to get the resources? That is why the resource mobilization efforts, and I mentioned those figures earlier, have been utterly dismal, right? In fact, if you look at what happened last year, there were huge shortfalls in tax revenue and expenditure. The shortfall in tax revenue for 25-26 was of an order of 1,92,461 crores. Cut in expenditure, 1,503 crores. If that is the situation, how do you spend? You can rob Paul to pay Peter, or otherwise, if that is the kind of broader macro and policy construct that we have, budget becomes pretty meaningless, right? That is exactly what we have seen, except, as I said, in 2 years when there was a lot of fanfare about tax cuts, right? There has been no big bang kind of effort on any expenditure priority, right? So that is where we are. Coming specifically to this year's budget, 26-27 budget. Again, this government has this habit of falling for all kinds of platitudes, 3 R's, 4 D's, 5 whatever. This time in the budget, we have 3 kartavya, right? Kartavya 1, kartavya 2, and 3. Utter platitudes. You see, these are like as if you're talking of some grand vision. A vision is okay. You have your vision of 2047 and Viksit Bharat and what have you, but budget is a much more modest exercise. Please do that, madam. Right? That is exactly what you're supposed to do. For any particular year, then you have to sort of say very specifically that, okay, these are the things that we are doing. All right. Now, if you come to the specifics, I'll take another 3-4 minutes, not more than that, Suchita. So, broadly, with respect to Kartavya 1, we are talking of scaling up manufacturing, and we talk of 7 broad areas and so on and so forth. For lack of time, I'll not get into all kinds of details, but this whole business of catching up on any of these with any reasonable competitor should have been the objective, right? Or other kind of comparative quest could have been that, okay, things have not been done thus far, we will do it in this particular year. Now, on both these counts, we failed miserably. Container technology, container manufacturing was mentioned, right? We say that we'll get into container manufacturing. Now, let me remind you, some of you may know this number, others who do not, please note it. China accounts for 95% of container manufacturing currently in the global economy, right? What kind of money are we putting on that container manufacturing expansion? It is not even peanuts. It's joke of a peanut, right? Where does it take you? On this whole business of where you want to kind of reach out to the world, produce containers for the global market and so on. I mean, what is this, right? Thinking of creating, a very good intention, creating champion SMEs. Easier said than done.
Yeah.
How do you do that? By doling out, some 10,000 crore has been set aside. You have of the some sort of 585 million enterprises in this country. 98% plus are MSMEs, right? Now, with this 10,000 crore, what are you going to do with them? Right? So these are some of the very obvious issues which immediately hit you hard. That are we on some funny page in a story which is being narrated? Are we serious at all? Yeah, I think these questions need to be asked. I think if there is only one thing.
Can you just,
I'll just wind up. Probably the only little thing where you can say that, okay, there was a bit of some sort of seriousness, that is in terms of infra push, especially public capital expenditure, 12.2 lakh crores. Okay, the number seems reasonably okay. Yeah. Rest of it is more like platitudes and so on. So IT sector is a growth engine, and I mean, just look at who's driving who. I mean, if you get into some of these things, coming specifically to questions of agriculture, livelihood, employment, and so on, it's a completely dismal story. So let me stop there as my first set of remarks. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing out several absurdities and, starting from a very methodological question of how the GDP is calculated. And of course, there are other areas where funds may be really sorry for the disturbance. So so how do we mobilize resources when we decide not to touch the taxes and not to do much to the deficit, because we want to show a good picture, project a good picture of a healthy and a sound and very neat picture of Indian economy. So thank you for your preliminary remarks. I'm sure there will be more to come in the interactive session. Now, if we talk about finding a right match between worker and workers, that needs mobility and the right skills. I now request Professor Irudayarajan to share his thoughts on provision for skill development and the issues of migration as represented in the budget. Can we just have it for 7 to 8 minutes, Professor Rajan?
Thank you so much, because I will compensate for Praveen Jha because he took more time. So that is also an adjustment we can do. I think I am not going to be talking so much on the budget and things like that, but I would like to link the budget to the economic survey, some of the statements made there. I would like to reflect on 3 chapters, chapter 11, 12, and 15. Now, there is something, because I would like to comment as a demographer, not as an economist in this particular context. If you look at it, they were using the population projection done based on the 2011 census for their calculations. I think that projection is now outdated. You are looking at the outdated projection and you are projecting many things. I think we need a new projections, and the fertility has come down very drastically than what we expected. And COVID came as a big player in mortality. And migration is so heavy after the 2011 census, particularly after the NDA came to power to promote what we call them smart cities. Smart city means migration. And we have seen the migration crisis in 2020. So migration is happening. So with that trend, they were using the old population projection. I think this is something they have not even thought about doing a new population projection for the country and state, including the finance commission. I think they should look at the new data. 27 census might come and it may be delayed, but at least that demographically you should look at the latest update. And they said that the demography is favorable to them for 10 years. But the latest projection we have done, which is available in the public domain, funded by the Population Foundation of India for all the states and territories, this dividend will continue for till 2046. 93 million people in the labor force, 15 to 54, and it will reach 100 million in 2046. Then we are going to have a decline. Now, when the force is coming in, and they have to talk about how to invest on higher education. I think this is something very, very important. Skilling. But what you see that, though they are talking about opening up what is called the ITs and IIMs and other central universities, what you see is a lot of Indian students are leaving the country. They were reported in their own report saying that close to 7 million. This is official statistics. If I believe what Praveen said about the growth rate will be put off, migrants would be put double. It should be 14 million students might be going away from India. And there will be a lot of outward remittances. But the point is they are making an important point. For one student coming from other countries to India, we are sending 28 students from here. So earlier we used to talk about brain drain, very olden days. Then they were talking about brain gain. People are coming back. Then there are people talking about brain circulation. But today what is happening, we are sending our best brains, putting so much money, 20 to 30 lakhs, crores of money leaving the country in terms of higher education. And the students were sold dreams by the recruitment agents. And most of them are what we call them, that they are doing unskilled work in other countries. They are helping the other country to grow. So what I call them, not even brain circulation, it is a brain waste. And we have a very good human resources, and our brain are being wasted by the so-called rich countries taking our best brain. And they are in the petrol pumps, they are in the gig worker, they are driving taxis. We have seen during COVID-19. So I think we have to talk about that. And added to that, many of them are not going to stay in America. With the type of immigration policies coming up, many of them will return. And we should talk about a policy on return migration, because they are going to return. It's not like they are going to stay in America. It's not like the olden days. And they are all come with what is called them the failed dreamer. What are you going to do to adjust to the economy here? Because they are going to come back. It's not like when they leave India, that's it. You don't need to worry about them. No, they are coming back. What is you are going to play a labor market? I think this is something very, very important. The second is that when you talk about demography dividend, we should also talk about the fertility crisis in India. It is very important. We should not just leave the things, because the fertility crisis is going to come up, because many of the couples, in fact, I would put 40% of the couples in the country now talking about just one child. And we know what happened to China on the one child family. And in fact, state like Kerala, where I work and where I stay, we have more grandparents than grandchildren. And grandchildren becoming a very rare occasion. But grandparents, you walk around everywhere, you see grandparents, and they are having almost 20% of the vote is with the grandparents. 1 out of 5 voters is here. They can vote and they can send the government out. 20% people, they have no other work. They'll go and vote in the morning itself. They stand at 6:30 itself to get voting. Not like other people, we don't vote. But these elderly, they think this is my last election. Let me go and vote. Next election also, they will be living. They are not going to die. But they believe that maybe next election is after 5 years. So I think this capturing the elderly, what are we are going to do? Because we are talking about only demographic dividend, which is the first demographic dividend everybody talks about. But we have to talk about the second demographic dividend, which is what I call them the silver dividend. You can see from the chairperson, lot of white hair is coming. You can see Praveen Jha. What is this? It's a silver economy. How do you engage the silver economy should be part of any policy discussion in this country. Second demographic dividend, which will be longer period, 20-25 years. And what you have to do, you have to empower them, and we have to engage them. Empowering, engaging of the senior citizen in the country should be part of your larger framework, but nothing about it. They talk about NCD, they talk about disease. People have disease, but they are qualitatively compared to my grandparents. My father was better and I am better. There is a change. Of course, you live with multiple disease, but still you are resourceful. You don't need to brand the elderly as they need care. They need care. I know that 40% of the unpaid work in the survey, they are talking about the land use. This is all by grandparents for the grandchildren. But many of the people I meet them in the city, they say, we are not having baby because there is nobody to care. The villages, you have grandparents. You can't, like how much these grandparents are contributing, we are not talking about. That's very important. And finally, Prime Minister of India want to make India as a skill capital. They are signing several agreements, EU mobility agreement, everything. And we are not talking about fair migration. We have to talk about fair migration, and we should talk about legal, orderly, safe migration. We have case of the undocumented migrants coming from America. So we should talk about safe, legal, and orderly migration. And we talk about what is called, what I call them, skills. But very sad to notice, our skilled people are being de-skilled in many countries. De-skilling is happening because they're getting money, but they are not doing the work. I would put maybe 70 to 80% of Indians who are abroad. They are not doing the job what they are qualified. They are getting money, but they are being de-skilled. And we are talking about skill formation, skill gap, skill capital, skill program. But we have to check, are they being de-skilled? And closing, we talk about digital addiction, but what about digital illiteracy? Among the senior citizens, among the migrants, they are not able to transfer money. I think digital addict is one part of the story, but there are people. We did a survey, 20 to 30, only 20 to 30% elderly are able to use what is called the Google Pay. And today you can't live without Google Pay because you are being cheated. You have to remember the number, and anything you want to do today, everything is digital. You want to buy a food, you want to book a ticket. I think creating a large chunk of elderly citizens, and you are not talking about them, and that is what the SDG goal talks about. No one should be left behind. I don't want that India should leave these 100 million citizens, because today India might be young, but the mean age of parliamentary is 60 and above. And BRICS, President, Prime Minister, everybody is 75, 76, and Donald Trump 78. His one tweet can change the whole world. So that we have to look at it very carefully and look at the elderly as assets and give them, empower them and engage them. I'll stop here for the time being. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And that was a very, that's a brilliant point. Number one, no census after 2011. And so what data are we depending on? And secondly, our students going out. Earlier, we used to say, why can't we retain engineers in our country? Why do they go there? It's now a question of why our 12th standard students don't stay in our country to complete their graduation. The whole thing about wastage of skill when they go out just to survive the kind of jobs they do. And very important points that you made about the changing demography, particularly of the southern states, where probably the demographic dividend, so-called, of the first demographic dividend has kind of been exited, and we have the silver demographic dividend. And it's a very important point to effort should be made to increase the digital literacy so that there is no digital arrests, and off late all the cases of digital arrests and frauds that you hear of are involved with the senior citizens, and that's a big thing that we need to correct. So thank you so much for this very new insight into what we should do about our people. So we talked about digital literacy, and that takes us to education sector. So may I now call upon Professor Rathore to express his views on the education sector and the livelihood opportunities arising out of it, and how the budget deals with it, if possible. Professor Rathore.
Thank you, Professor Suchita. Once again, thanks to Dr. Arjun for inviting me on this platform. So specifically, I will be talking on the education sector in the context of the present budget, but just give a broader picture that when we are saying the education sector, I will divide it into the growth of education sector rather into three different verticals. The first and foremost important part of this sector is accessibility, that the education should reach to the maximum, and second is the quality, and the third aspect is the relevance of that particular education, that whatever, because a lot of discussion took place that whether the education which we are giving is relevant to pursue the livelihood or not. So that is the third aspect. So when we are talking about the first one, that is accessibility, so in that we have clear targets with us. NEP is also talking about that the gross enrollment ratio in the school side should reach 100% by 2030. The gross enrollment ratio in the higher education should reach 50% by 2035. So we have clear targets. And in order to achieve this target, as everybody knows that, especially in the field of school education, means a lot has been done actually, means that infrastructure, the teaching staff, uh, probably the sufficient numbers are there, and that's the reason that in primary level we are almost that GAR is around 100%. Yeah, some dropout cases are there when we are moving to the higher education, but that should be taken up separately. So in higher education, the average gross enrollment ratio till that is around 28-29%, and that has to go to 50%. So definitely there is a need to create the infrastructure actually in this area. Creating infrastructure, probably a lot of good announcements are made in this budget when we are talking about the creating the infrastructure. So the first one was five university townships. So the budget is talking about creation of five university township. So they are not the independent or standalone university we are talking about when we are saying university township. It is a complete structure, means starting from the teaching to the skilling to the R&D. So this is one thing which will not only add in increasing the GR, but at the same time will help in the other aspects also, as I mentioned, in the field of R&D. Similarly, another important announcement was five regional medical hubs also. So these five medical regional hubs will also contribute in some way towards achieving the target of education sector. So what were the announced actually? Quickly, I am reading out those. The budget is talking about three new aims of Ayurveda. The budget is talking about one new National Institute of Mental Health and Neuroscience, NIMAS, for the Northern India. The budget is talking about three National Institute for Pharmaceutical Education and upgradation of seven further NIPERs which are existing in the country to give a push to pharmaceutical education. One new National Institute of Design to high-tech tool rooms. In, then uh, another important sector was the allied healthcare. So the budget is also talking about creating the infrastructure or the new institution and upgrading the institution for allied health professionals. Another aspect that is in the veterinary education, vet education, and associate area. So again, the budget is talking about that the infrastructure for the veterinary education needs to be created. So, and one more, the last one probably was the new institute for the hospitality. So these are the new institutions basically, or these are rather, I will say, the new infrastructures which will be created out of the budget announcement. So this additional infrastructures definitely will help in increasing the enrollment. Now, the second aspect which I touched upon was the quality of the education. So when we are saying quality of education, I will just talk for both of the sectors, means the primary school education as well as the higher education. So again, in the even the economic survey, the mention was made, the provision for the budgets are made for the survey, that is the National Achievement Survey, NAS survey, which NCRT is doing to assess the learning ability of the learners. Also, the Prakhar, that was the performance assessment review and analytics of knowledge for holistic development of the student. So the focus of government is again means both of this in the school education sector. These terms are again referred back. It means there is a focus on the quality of education. When we are talking about the higher education, again in the higher education, the provision for I think around 300 crore is made towards a scheme that is merit, which is to give uh, thrust to the technical education in the country. Another two, three very important schemes, which were no doubt they are not the new scheme, but sufficient budget provisions were made for these schemes also. One was the PM Usha. PM Setu was another very important. PM Setu and substantial fund of, I think, more than 6,000 crore is made for that PM Setu, which is the upgradation of the ITIs. Then another very important announcement which I found in this budget was 200 crore allotment for PM research chair, that the scientists or researchers who are out of the country, and a very sincere effort to bring back them to the system, especially means at this stage this is related to the technical education more. So I think creating infrastructure, giving thrust for the quality of education, these two aspects are well taken care in this particular budget. Another very important aspect, which is directly not reflected in this budget, but yeah, indirectly, I can say that lot of other announcement about which some previous speakers also talked about, they will have a direct impact on the education, and especially the STEM education. STEM education is education actually which in over in past few years or a decade, you can say that we saw a decline in the enrollment in the STEM education. Why there was a decline in the enrollment in the STEM education? The reason is quite simple, that if suppose you are not getting enough opportunity for the employment of your capability, obviously, so definitely you will pursue or you will go to some other sector. That's why the IT sector or the commerce sector actually flourished during the at the cost, I will say at the cost of STEM basically. So how the STEM education indirectly is getting lot of thrust through this budget. I would like to quickly say that the first announcement in this budget was the Biopharma Shakti, that the India will be developed as a global biopharma manufacturing hub. So if suppose a global hub for biopharma is to be developed, so definitely the students will get opportunities, especially the students of science or the biological science will get opportunities. Ma'am also talked about the semiconductor mission 2.0, then the AI mission was there, then the critical mineral missions are there, then the electronic component manufacturing is there. So again, all these missions which were again given a thrust in this budget will help us in increasing the enrollment in science and technology. Jha was talking about the container manufacturing. Yeah, at some point of time we will have to start. If China is at 95%, so they might have started from some point of time. So the container manufacturing, the government has started giving emphasis on that also. So that container manufacturing, construction equipment manufacturing, ship repair was another part. Then sea plan, because 20 new national waterways were proposed in this budget. So again, all this means the manufacturing sector. When I'm saying manufacturing sector, it means the mechanical side or the ITI side will get a thrust, means the students will get employment in those areas. Then another thing was the integrated textile program. This integrated textile program can again attract the student toward this discipline, because there were a lot of textile institute, but everybody might have observed that the enrollment in these textile institute also reduced over a period of time. So this integrated textile parks will also help in increasing the enrollment. the budget is talking about 7 high-speed rail corridors. So if suppose such corridors are there definitely there will be the demand for the mechanical side, there will be demand for the electrical side. So the technical means in the STEM, the technical or engineering side will get some thrust. The construction side or the civil side will also be getting benefit out of that announcement of city economic region CER, that is 5,000 crore for per CER, and some dedicated chemical park to give thrust to the chemical sector. Then I use pharma and drug testing. So what I mean to say is that directly, if you are saying directly creation of infrastructure, enrolling the enrollment, that is the one aspect. But indirectly, there are many other important announcements in this budget which will give the thrust towards not only increasing the enrollment, but for I should say, a rational educational direction to achieve what is envisaged in Vision 2047 of Viksit Bharat. So I think for the first phase, whatever was presented in the budget, I just share. During the discussion, I will take up the other points. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you very much for presenting a very detailed canvas of what are the announcements and what may happen when those announcements actually roll out uh, on the ground in a real force. And of course, you mentioned about accessibility, quality of education, and the relevance, right? So I would like to know from you later that there was also an announcement about orange capital. Yeah, the schools will be school children will be taught how to manufacture, how to make reels and send them. So, would like to know your views on that. And of course, I think there has been a question or a comment in the box about NEP leaving many children outside the school, or rather, excluding children from school. So maybe you can take it up at the second round of interaction. So, okay, so from education to employment, when we move, we talk about urban and rural sector, and here we would like to listen to Mr. Sandeep Chachra, who will present his views on urban and rural employment and overall well-being. If possible, also touch upon climate change, because that's an important area on which I think the budget has not made much announcements. Yeah. So, Mr. Chachra, are you here?
Yes, and thank you, and greetings to all who are listening in or watching it later, as well as thank you to you, Professor Krishnaprasad, and colleagues at IMPRI for having me here. I will, within 7 to 8 minutes, try to do my best to cover the vast plethora of things you have indicated, and I hope there's time for interaction. So let me say that uh, every single budget cannot be seen in isolation. And the budget of 26-27 comes in at a time when it inherits, with all the previous ones, a humongous distress of what I would call working people that transacts across rural and urban workers in organized and beyond organized informal sectors. I'll focus in there. So that's where I want to make the first point. And therefore, every single budget which we have been doing needs to be analyzed from the perspectives of the working people, which is of our country. We can call it, for the time being, a caste, class, gender, and ethnicity analysis of the budget. I will not limit it only to a gendered analysis of budget. That's the second point I want to make. And I think I invoke all to study the figures from those perspectives and realize how do they respond to the largest segment or the majorities of the people of our country. And in that context, I often invoke the thinking of what's called a songbird. A songbird in every single budget, which can sing a song which is music to the ears of our people in India. And I think this budget as Professor Jha was beginning to speak, I find it pretty songless. So I want to sort of say that. So there's no song in the budget that I hear from the views of working people on the ground. Now let's look at some of the data. So let's take the figures of what was referred to earlier broadly, PLFS. Let's take the PLFS 23-24 data. Now, by the PLFS data, given the working people, we have roughly about 61 crore people out of the 145 crore people that we have today, who can be considered as working people based on the data of PLFS. Now, if you look at that figure, and then we dig deeper, based on the census definitions of who's got work in the past 1 week, and that's what PLFS also uses, we'll find that roughly about 58 crore people out of the 61 men and women workers, not the child labor I'm referring to here, work in the last. That 3 crores of people wanting to work have never found work. Now, that's not a small number. But if we now dig deeper and can you please? Because I see weak internet connection. Am I audible?
Yeah, the voice is breaking a bit. Yeah, voice is breaking in between, but maybe you can repeat. Now it's better.
Yeah. So out of the 61 crore people, roughly about 58 crore people found work. This is 23-24 PLFS data. And 3 crore never found work, despite wanting to work. That's not a small number. Now, if you look at income figures from the same PLFS data, we'll find out, and I've noted some figures here, and these are data analysis done by fellow and competent economists on data crunching based on government data, whatever inequalities may be there, notwithstanding, we'll find that out of the 61 crore, only less than 22% or of people, actually 22% of the people of the 61 crores earned less than or more than 22,000 rupees per month. That means roughly about 70% or 72% or 78% of the people were below 15,000 per month. And similarly, if you look at the other side, 27% or therearound earn less than 100 rupees a day. This is the income data from the PLFS. Whatever of the Indian workers, actually about half the Indian workers roughly earn less than 10,000 rupees per month. So this is the factuals on the one side. We are arriving into the 26-27 budget with these numbers. And who are these workers? What's the trend there? Casualized, informal, insecure, despite the promises of so-called labor codes. Casualized, informal, part-time, out of work, half in work, periodic work, all kinds of continuum there, which we would largely call people in the reserve army of labor. Available for work, partly employed, shortly employed, 1 week, 1 day a week, some on the other extreme not employed at all, which includes, for instance, refugees, just to sort of make it more popular and make it more relatable. And what is the other trend we see in these years? The other trend we see is a massive growth in women's workforce participation. It's nearly doubled from 23% to about 42%. And what drives women into work? I mean, it's welcome. It's welcome. But what is the precarity driving into their work? And welcome. But what is it? And the construction of women agencies there is quite clear. Look at the gig economy numbers. There's a lot of talk these days about gig workers, and what kind of minimalistic protection we can offer to gig workers, incremental protection we can offer to gig workers. Good, but hopefully the future responds to it. We had less than about 1 million gig workers by 2022. The numbers were roughly around 70 lakhs or 75 lakhs or something like that. I don't remember exactly, less than 1 million. Niti Aayog goes on to project a 23 times increase in the numbers of gig workers by 2030. So we're talking of a huge efflux or push towards what is called gig work, the kind of work we all understand, totally insecure, totally sort of, let me say, at the edge of precarity. And we don't have time to get into describing what gig workers today are in our country. Men gig workers and women gig workers in the various platforms that we're talking about. Women, of course, saddled with a lot of history and therefore a lot of precarities of history along gendered lines. Having said that, now look at the response we see in the budget of 2026-27. There are massive expectations from this perspective, but what is the response that we see? The first response that we see is what I would say a continuity of cash transfer schemes, not a growth, just a stable continuity. Well, let's take PM Kisan, the same budget allocations. There were a lot of expectations from the working people that minimalist as it may be, survivalist as it may be, or the few thousand rupees that it may transfer to their bank accounts. Both women states have these women transfer schemes. This is West Bengal, for instance, 1,200 rupees per month. Minimalist as it may be, somehow it adds up some kind of a pathway or additional pathway to the critical survival spaces. We don't see growth. Yeah? What do we see instead? We see a contraction, and this has been debated elsewhere, from the promises, from even the minimalist promises of the Mahatma Gandhi Employment Guarantee Scheme. So we don't see any growth there. Yeah? Rather, we see retractions of and debates around what that guarantee is. Is it a guarantee anymore? What is the sort of central and the state contributions? And we know the state's fiscal spaces that they have. So we see a net decline there. It wasn't great either. We were only promising 100, never realized, but we are going to likely to contract despite the logo of 125 days with all kind of contractions. What is the third thing that we see there? A basic recognition of the precarity through the food guarantee or food transfer schemes. Yeah. So the same thing continues, the PDS extension and the free guarantee extension. What do we see instead? Professor Jha was celebrating we see CapEx expenditure, the capital expenditure. And it used to be 2.38 lakh crore rupees. Today, it has climbed up 10 years later to about 12.2 lakh crores, and reasonable and doable perhaps. But what's the analysis around there? If it is promised as an employment guarantee scheme, we need to review what's happened. Now let's look at this. Last year and the year before, roughly about 60% plus, in some analysis 62%, of the CapEx expenditure was consumed by railways and road corridors, road and railways. Has it created employment in any meaningful ways? All data will tell you. Some will justify it as time lag issues, that it will in future, these freight corridors, it will in future create, but it hasn't happened. The other promise was that governmental CapEx expenditure will crowd in private investments, both FDI-based investments as well as domestic capital investments. It hasn't happened at all. All data, I think we have the numbers.
Yeah.
Investments. So why it has not is creating employment? What we have really created is a very capital intensive sort of situation. And therefore, with this, don't see any specter of massive growth in employment or even an incremental growth in employment. And the results are out there to see, with the swelling number of gig workers, by the swelling number of out of work people, partially employed people, precarity in agrarian and urban India. So this is what we see at the moment. What we also have is this vexed situation of so-called trade deals. Yeah? The budget didn't talk about it too much, but it's at the backdrop. So what was our response in the budget? That we will put in something to promote what is called the MSME sector, which Professor Jha spoke to, 98% of our massive employment creators, and the numbers in running into above 5 millions, with the response that we have of 10,000 crore rupees. It's like not even a drop. And that too in the context that we will put money into MSMEs, which are going to protect our exports, make our exports competitive. And the idea was footwear, leather, textiles, because these have been very highly hit with the US trade deal. Now we come to the trade deals. I think more analysis is needed because we just have the headlines. We don't have the details of trade deals. But from what we hear, that these are incorporating, these are deals which will drastically impact our agriculture sector. These are deals which are likely to drastically, because dumping is going to happen. What I heard from the US Truth Social, President Trump's Truth Social thing, that America will have no barriers, no tariff barriers, financial and non-financial, no barriers, 0%. So people will come in, and India will get an 18% tariff deal. We don't know. We'll see the details later. The same thing goes on to EU. So, for my understanding of the headlines and outside information to be verified, is that this trade deal will enable sort of EU dumping or EU access to a agrarian sector, to an animal husbandry sector, to a fishery, which will incorporate workers, informal workers, working peoples in all of these sectors at the lowest end of the value chain, perhaps exploitative end of the value systems. Now, this is something that we also want to sort of look at in the context of the budget. Of course, the budget numbers won't directly talk to it. The other thing I want to say, and quite quickly in rushing this proposal
Just a
forward,
couple of minutes now.
yeah, a minute and not more, ma'am. I also want to talk about the little beginnings of a song that I wish to hear, which obviously hasn't been flourished, which is of the care economy. So, to your point, that what appeals to you in the budget, of course, not by the numbers that the allocations have been given, is somewhat the recognition of women in the care economy, of women per se, the idea of working women's hostels, the idea of women's hostels, the idea of preparing some 10,000 or some, I forget the numbers, or a lakh women caregivers, again with an eye to exports, which Professor Rajan was speaking to, how resilient, how safe, how protected, those are questions to be asked. But the beginnings of that and the recognition of the fact that perhaps we should really protect, we should really encourage, we should really protect, and we should really sort of move forward to pathways for women's employment, I think are areas to be talked about. In ending, let me say, in this critique that I just made, or in these observations that I made, the pathways are quite clear. What is this budget? And that's where I find a gap doing to solidarity economy. What is the kind of investments and budget allocations that we have enhanced or multiplied? It needs a multiplier in terms of cooperatives and people's solidarity economies and people's collective economies, whether in rural or urban India. I don't see that. And that relates to your question of the point you were making about climate. Uh, the budget is climate silent. Yeah. So you said it yourself. Now, what would have the working people expected? A minimalist thinking. Yeah. Even in the minimalist way, they would have expected some thinking, some articulation, and therefore the money to boot. It's not, budget is not rhetorical talk of the kartavyas only. Yeah? Kartavyas have to translate the ground. So, would have expected loss and damage compensation to the people who lose their jobs, to the urban workers who lose days and days of jobs to air pollution and ban on construction in the urban centers, or on heat waves, to the people whose habitats are lost because of landslides and floods, whose homes are gone, whose small agricultural plots are gone. Women and men, children, yeah, would have expected that there is some recognition, some kartavya like talk, the fourth kartavya, yeah, of protecting our people in terms of climate induced loss and damages, huge losses and damages, not just to work, to lives, to health, to livelihoods. The kind of protections, health protections that the health budget today is not the topic of the health budget. We don't see it there. So I think we necessarily need to have these conversations on the class, caste, ethnicity, and gender dimensions. Unless we, as in the popular media or on these kind of spaces, unless we start to look at budgets from the perspective of our working people along those lines, we are not going to be able to create a public discourse. We are not a country which is homogeneous. a country which is monolithic. We're not a country where talk of this is what I would like to say in the first instance, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you very much for immediately stressing the reasons and the pathways that increase the distress of the working class to start with, and what best beginning for Ms. Amarjeet Kaur to come in, who is going to talk about the union budget from the point of view of working class.
Thank you, Professor Suchita. I should thank Professor Arjun for inviting me to this webinar. And my job is made quite easy by the previous speakers. I agree with the analysis made by Professor Praveen Jha. Most of the points he raised and the questions he raised, I agree with that. And the questions raised on the question of migration and de-skilling of our youngsters who are going abroad, that was by Irudayarajan ji. I agree with those assessments. And just now what Sandeep ji mentioned about the gravity of situation, how many working people are there, those who are getting some kind of work 1 day, 7 day, 10 day, or full time or regular or outsourced or casual or daily or contract workers. And this budget doesn't talk about that as far as the working people are concerned. And he said it is songless budget. That's true, but there is a song, and that song is finish of this country even to remain as a welfare state. So that song is very much there. So what has things which Suchita ji mentioned, Praveen ji also mentioned, that big terms are used, big announcements are used, so many hubs to be created, so many corridors to be created, smart cities to be created, all that. But when you come to the ground reality, you find that nothing has moved as far as those things are concerned, or very little has moved. And their situation is something different. When GDP was being discussed by Suchita ji raised this question, and Praveen Jha ji very clearly mentioned about which economist is saying what thing. But the government is not at all realizing. I'm reading their situation which they have mentioned in the recent meeting in Davos. They had mentioned that we are emerging market, and we have left behind Japan to become a 5 trillion economy, to achieve Viksit Bharat by 2047 goal. So it has to give further impetus to ease of doing business. Now, this is what they stated in Davos. So what does it mean? It is total U-turn from welfare state government who should guarantee welfare to the people. And just before the budget comes in the parliament, that has been the trend. They come out with certain schemes and programs which are done just before the budget is presented. And that clearly shows what is the intention of the government. So that's where MG Narega was wound up. And that is where we find you find mention in the budget speech about power sector and generation, and government is bringing electricity bill 2025. You find mention that farmers are going to be helped in a big way, but the farmers are on street because seed bill is being brought, and that is going to hurt India, our universities also, the agriculture universities also, and it will hurt our farmers also. So there are two production forces in our country, the farmers and the workers, and both are left out in this budget. So from that point of view, while agreeing with those points which I said on that, on Professor Randhir, when he was speaking about education, but the truth is that majority of the government schools are being closed. So what are we talking about? And private universities bill was brought So there is no encouragement to our government sector universities. The shift of priorities for the foreign universities. And then how you are going to excel when the modern technology or the AI question is, because your expenditure year after year, budget after budget in research and development is reducing. So with those things, talking about 2047 and Viksit Bharat and all, it is all trying to sell the dreams only to the people. So that is the serious situation. While announcing these big schemes, what is the truth? The truth is, I quote one example. There was a Jal Jeevan mission. All these missions, beautifully, words are used in every budget after budget. Sita Ramanji has been using very beautiful words and making quotes and all. And this Jal Jeevan mission was started in 2019 in a big way. This I am talking specifically because today also in the newspapers there is a report of deaths from Indore. Deaths in Gujarat from water issue, polluted water issue. So whatever amount they had announced, and they had said that 193.5 million households will be covered and will be linked to the tap water. Now, last year they did not give any money to that project. And this year they have said no money. And now they are saying state governments will have to do it. So water is a basic need, not only of rich and affluent. They can buy bottled water. But lower income group and the poor people, our workers, formal, informal, especially informal economy workers, they depend on water, not buying bottles. So where is the expenditure? Rather, they are going away from that. And I got to know that this year they have not allocated any funds, and they have said state governments will have to do. So like in Manrega, when that has been wound up from demand base, bringing a new act which is supply based. We were saying, the trade unions were saying that that kind of Manrega program is needed in the urban areas also.
Urban area.
What you should do is increase the working days of Manrega, increase their minimum wages also, implement it as it is demand based, don't reduce its budget, but budget after budget they reduced its allocation. And we were asking for urban employment of that kind guarantee. Now from guarantee, they have brought it a supply based, and now they will decide, and there also 40% to be paid by the states. And there it will be supply based, means the government of India will decide where to send those funds. It's no more demand based. So one can understand wherever ruling party is having their own governments, they will send the money there only. Because the government is totally running away from its responsibility, even as a welfare state. What to talk of what is written in preamble. A democratic, secular, sovereign, socialist republic of India we want to build. So don't talk of socialist republic, but at least welfare state we were. They are running away from the welfare state understanding also, that project also. Lots of the points which raised by Sandeep Chachra on these facts and figures given. And now he told about 2023, 2024, 61 crore. And now we are in 2026 already. And according to us, it has become 67 crore already. And out of those 67 crore labor force, those who are married and who have family. So you are dealing with the more than 100 crore people. Does budget talk about it? I'm not including farmers into it. Small and marginal farmers. If you include them, so what is happening to 120 crore population of this country? Is budget addressing it? Budget is not addressing it. How do I look at it to save that time? I don't want to repeat what others said. I'm only trying to just stress upon what the others have said and what I want to say. Here, what do we look as a trade unionist, how I look at it? I find that this budget is ignoring totally, and budget after budget they have been just not looking at the Article 39A, B and C, which state has a responsibility. There are directive principles. They have to talk about livelihood. They have to talk about equitable distribution of material resources. They have to prevent concentration of wealth. They are supposed to look at the basic needs of the people. But instead of doing that, they have brought 4 labor codes. And the trade unions have been fighting tooth and nail against these budgets after budget which is coming, and just ignoring, in the name of ease of doing business, the working class, the farming community. They all are being pushed to the wall. And when we are fighting back, the government wants to crush us. And the best way is to finish off unionism. And to attack trade unions, they have brought 4 labor codes. So they have not addressed workers here. They have not addressed farmers here as citizens. And what are citizens to be made? They have to be made into labharthis. Youth should not ask for employment. The government will do only employability. You will not provide for jobs and create jobs. You will be only talking about skills. But what is the track record of government? Some years back, they talked about 1 crore. There was a big budget for 1 crore youth to be trained in skills. How many could be trained? Not even 3%. Where is that fund? Nobody is ready to tell. So schemes are rolled out, and those schemes are wound up. Those schemes don't see anything at the ground level. So they fixed term employment. They are making a law. That means there will be no formal jobs. Even government sector and public sector, no recruitments are happening. And this budget is silent about it. And they are talking about fixed term employment to come, and they are saying it is going to be very good. But that will be actually informalizing the formal economy. So informal economy is in a worst situation. Worker is in a worst situation. So the government is going in that direction. And also collective bargaining is being reduced through these labor codes, and the government day in and day out is talking about implementing it. They have already notified the labor codes, and they have notified the rules also, and they are saying from 1st April they are going to implement. So from that point of view, even the space to fight back, what is there in the constitution to be realized at the ground level, even that space for fighting is being shrunk by the government policies. That is their approach as far as that is concerned. I had lots of the points, but I am not mentioning those. But their survey you talked about, economic survey accepts that FDIs are going out more and FDIs are not coming. But they have announced 100% FDI in insurance. And in many core sectors, they are saying 100% FDIs. They are themselves accepting no FDI is coming, FDI is going out. And then they are saying we are going to give incentives to the corporates and the businesses to invest here. Baba, how much incentive you will give? 60 lakh crore rupees of our public sector banks have been written off from the registers. Where did that money go? Whom that money was given? That was given for development. That was given for investment. Then why these people are taking money from our public sector banks and just asking registers to be written off, and then they go and spend outside? So it is totally a government which has no heart for the poor people. It is a pro-corporate budget, and it's not only pro-corporate. Sandeep touched about trade fairs. The things have started coming out. That whole announcement made yesterday, the things have started coming out. Certain of the things which they are saying, Indian government had already in the last budget reduced the import duty to all the things which were to come from United States of America. They had already done. Even before his all tariff dhamki jo wo de rahe the, even before that, they had done in their budgets. It was there. So it is totally government is not caring about India. they don't want to build up India as per Indian constitution's wishes and the people's wishes. It's a people's constitution. People have given this constitution to themselves, but they are building a corporate India, and corporate India will not have space for workers, the poor, formal, informal, because formal workers are getting reduced. All the vacant posts, about 67 lakh in the central government, in the state government, in the public sector, they are not filling. And slowly and slowly, all those sanctioned posts are dying. And there is a law that you cannot create a new job. You will not create a new sanctioned job. That all is happening. So everything is in front of us. I think this is true that some people are not able to hear song over here, but that song you were expecting for the working masses who are manufacturing, who are doing services, who are in excavation, who are in exploration. It is because of them India is being built up. But it is there for them, there is no song. But there is very much song of for Indian corporates and the foreign corporates. Those who are already looting money, there is much song for them. They must be very happy with what Sita Ramanji was continuously declaring. So I would like to stop here. If there will be any questions, I will come back to that. I think it is totally to make our people cripple, to make them dependent on doles, wait for elections, announce the scheme at that time, then distribute some money, garner the votes. So you are confident you will be able to, and to keep the people busy, keep them divided on religious lines, communal lines, on language issues, on migrant issue, non-migrant issue, foreigner issue, then our neighbors issue, all that. So keep people busy there, and no, don't worry about it. When the elections come, distribute some doles and garner the votes. We are really in a very bad shape. Our democracy is in a very bad shape. Our harmony is in very bad shape. And our economy is also in very bad shape. I think that the government is compelled to follow these kinds of policies because government wants to build corporate India. And if they have to build corporate India and not an India for all the people for which our freedom fighters dreamed, then that is the only way they will follow. And for us, the only way is to be on the streets and to fight back. On 20th February, we are going to have a big strike where farmers, agriculture workers, and the industrial workers all are going to go for strike, opposing this budget also, of course, but opposing the labor codes and their rules. So we are on the streets and we will be on the streets, and we are opposing this budget also. Already the campaign is going on against this budget.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Madam Amarjeet Kaur ji, for bringing your passion and activism into your presentation. I really appreciate the way you brought out the question about Jal Jeevan Mission, and the slogans on the one hand and the schemes on the one hand, and the rights are taken away. In fact, it is my own personal observation that just as firms went flexible, we call something as a flexible firm, where the core workers are few and the peripheral workers are many, so that you can deal with the peripheral workers the way you want. Okay. Similarly, in the governance, political governance, probably when the laws are reduced and the schemes are introduced, it is like the flexible governance, because law gives you a right and law doesn't give you a poster value. Okay. For Ujjwala, there can be a poster, but for right to information, there is no poster. So, one can talk about it at length, but of course, we are constrained by our theme. We want to talk about the budget and where it takes us. Of course, the larger political canvas canvas of the political economy cannot be ignored totally. And thank you very much for bringing in all those insights. We have, of course, spoken about the yojanas, okay, various schemes and the glorious picture that they present to us, and whether you also brought this point out that over a period of time, some of the things may not even remain and the funds allocation may not happen, and suddenly it may be just left to the states to do. We of course have GRAMji, which is going to once again centralize the power of deciding where to create the on employment opportunities. So though it is glorious to say that, okay, the number of days is more and maybe the payment will be higher, but whether the states will have the power and the panchayats don't have the power to implement or take their own step forward, then of course, whether it is there or it is not there, it makes no difference. And workers, of course, are pushed into distress, as even Mr. Sandeep Chachra had spoken about. So do we have Udit Mishra joining us? I think he was going to be busy elsewhere, but if he has found some time to be here, can we know, Priyanka, whether Udit Mishra is here?
No, ma'am. Sir has not joined us.
Okay. Okay, so can we take some questions, Priyanka, if you can read out questions, or if the panelists have something to say, the second round of their opinion or understanding after this churning of thoughts has happened, if anybody wants to express a view till questions begin to emerge.
Let's take some questions, because otherwise they will be sidelined.
I can start reading out the questions one by one.
Please
I
do
think
that.
we have
Please do
5
that.
or 6. Yes.
Please do that.
So the first question is that NEP 2020 is throwing children, especially girl children, out of education by closing small rural schools and poor students with the exit options. How can it improve access? Quality is going down with putting sevaks in place of trained teachers. And I think an associated question is also the next one, which is that what about ensuring critical thinking having a crucial role in quality education?
Okay, so since anybody can take it, I think, is it addressed to any one specific panelist, Priyanka?
No, ma'am, not particular
It says
panelists,
to
but
everyone.
I think yes.
It is
I
to
read the question,
everyone.
it
And
says to everyone.
Suchita ji, I want to say that NEP is designed for privatizing the education. NEP is also designed to make the questioning difficult. It's not for raising questioning, making a young mind to probe, to question, to discover. It is designed in a way that you have to believe what we are saying.
It is not
It's more from science to mythology, trying to go over there. So this question written, critical thinking, of course, we are seriously feeling that this critical thinking is being suppressed.
I would just like to add that for in this NEP for the first time, if you will read this NEP with the National Credit Framework, and the National Credit Framework and NEP for first time is talking that there will be equal credit or equal weightages for the experiential learning. So the NEP is not confining the student inside the classroom, whereas it is allowing the student to move out of the classroom, and that learning basically will be, that culture of learning will be inculcated, and that will enhance the critical thinking, the team working, the communication skills. So I think we should read the NEP in line with the other provisions also. And one question, probably, I don't know, without any facts and figure, that was parked there, that the schools are closing. The there should be a linkage between the education policies talking about Anganwadis and the primary schools, and uh, this economic survey is also talking about that as on date 52% or more than 52% primary schools are linked with the Anganwadis basically. So that continuous path means for first time actually in this energy effort was made to synergize the education from the Anganwadi up till the highest level, that is the research level. So I think a synchronous path is there. If any specific incidents that due to this reason the schools are closing, because as per the information in the primary sector, 69% school belongs to the government sector basically, and remaining schools are with the private sector. So the maximum schools are with the government sector. Government is taking care of these schools basically, and we're trying to make a path for the quality education.
Yeah, thank you for your intervention. May I come in for
So,
closure of schools?
after that, I want to come on this issue, please.
Right. So, so I hope what I'm saying is not episodic and isolated case. I mean, I hope it is an isolated case. I'm sorry. So, in Mumbai, for example, number of schools are closing down, and the reason that is given is that the building is unsafe, whereas the structural audit says that the building is quite safe. Okay, and they have been just demolished, and no new school, and it has been given to private builders. You know, Mumbai land is very, very precious, and the land is getting given to. I can actually show you the cases right now. There are activists who are standing for Marathi language who are fighting with the local authorities not to close the case, not to close the schools. But in Maharashtra, there is a big thing about closing the regional language schools. So it's not without any empirical evidence that this is being said. And at the same time, okay, all those things about going out of the class and learning from nature and learning from experience and so on sounds very good. But just as, you know, we are saying every industry India should become a global hub for, say, toy manufacturing. We should become a global hub for, say, drone manufacturing or say AI and so on. So we seem to get stuck into this song that we want to become a global hub in X, Y, or Z or things like that. But whereas the ground reality tells us something else. So although new economic education policy looks very good, very glorious in terms of expression, but I think what actually, see, basically there is no standardization, and so every educational institution is interpreting that new educational policy in its own way and at its own convenience. While this may again be said that an institution knows its students' needs and therefore it does what it does. But what it therefore does is that it creates a whole lot of chaos. I think I will stop here because there will be more cases and more episodes that I can say, but I think that it should be for Professor Jha to come in now. Professor Jha.
You see, this indeed, thanks, Suchita. This is indeed a very large theme. There are lots of issues here and so on. But simple point, in fact, government statistics from across the states, several states, are showing that the schools have been closed. Rajasthan, 12,000 schools, that was the estimate last year. In 2024, I'm saying. Yeah, the government's own admission that this has happened. And this is true for several states and so on. So that's one aspect. Basically, a certain sort of distance guarantee had been given in the right to education. That has been done away with. You had said that the schools will be available within 2 kilometers or whatever else and so on and so forth. But, you start merging schools and so on. So that merger is one of the more important ways of closing of these schools and so on. Second, look at, 90% of the norms are being violated. I have worked on education for the last 20 years. I can talk for at least 20 years on this particular theme. Yeah, it's just bizarre the way it has been kind of, the way it's being murdered, right? My own state, where I come from, Bihar, more than 50% of teachers continue to be para-teachers. Why para-teachers? What does para-teacher mean? Somebody like a teacher. Would you send your own children to such schools? This has been a massive kind of assault on the bottom half of citizens in this country in the name of quality education. Where is the quality education? I'm sorry, I just feel very, very upset when people sort of think of NEP as transitioning to a better situation. Absolutely no. Again, on that, I have written several papers in Economic and Political Weekly and other places and so on. We don't have time to get into all the details here, but there are very serious issues which need to be taken very seriously. Thank you.
But that they should not be read in isolation with NEP only.
No, this is nothing in isolation. This is part of the neoliberal macroeconomic policy regime. NEP is very much part of that.
Mm.
You know, the larger kind of macroeconomic policy architecture, where actually, I mean, just look at the unit costs that we are spending on, education and health. Compare that with any decent country in the world within the developing world. Forget about Norway and, very advanced countries and so on. We don't stand anywhere. You know, let's compare us with China. Look at their spending on school education and look at what we do. Just look at the unit costs, right? Because we are comparable countries, right? We pale into utter shadow of China, right? So we have to take these things very seriously, sir. I mean, I think education, health, Professor Amarjeet Kaur has been repeatedly making this point for the last 15 years that India is the only country in the world which is significant in size, wants to become a superpower without paying due attention to health and education. All numbers are testimony to what Professor Sen has been saying.
So very simple thing, just to add, and please not take long. Why don't we think of a situation, instead of all the money that goes for life-saving kind of cash transfers, that's the second discourse, or what kind of employment. Why doesn't it go to health and education? Look at the health and education sector as a percentage of GDP. There's lots of demand. 9 is mine, 6 is mine. We are not even at 2.5% of GDP on health, for instance. So what is the human, let me use capitalist language. What's the human capital we are creating, and how are we creating that human capital? There are very serious problems. There are very serious problems. Take an example of medical inflation. Medical inflation, which it's a largely privatized sector. Our PHCs don't have the equipment, doctors, nurses. Kerala is the only state which has invested in it, and therefore has come out with this whole question of infant mortality rate and progressions there. But look at it more generally. What are we investing there? Our medical inflation is the highest perhaps in the world, certainly in Asia. The numbers are there, 12% or something like that. Who pays for this? Who pays for the rising cost of medicines? What's the percentage contribution of medical expenditure from a worker's budget? It's upwards of 50%.
Yes.
Or something like that. What's the kind of what Professor Jha was speaking to? Ramshackle schools. What's the kind of fees arrangements workers are forced to send in the hope of a class shift their children to? Domestic workers in Delhi, you take rural workers. Many don't. Look at where girls drop out. Look at where boys drop out. So all of those numbers add up, sort of uncertain manners to what's happening under the dialogue called a new education policy. That's the dialogue, that's the framing. We are being sold that there's something in the new education policy that will deliver our children for future. Has it been delivering for the last years? Is it delivering this year? Look at the numbers. I just want to, since we're talking about budgets, I don't want to shift to ground truths. But look at the numbers. And I think there's a whole, we didn't talk about health and education today, but there's a whole critique of what's happening on that side of the thing. And where is the money going? 12,000 crores. Professor Kaur, Amarjeet ji spoke to it. 12.2 thousand crores, lakh crores, is going into capital expenditure, capex. Is it delivering a human future? It's not. Is it delivering a worker's future? It's not. You can justify it by saying it'll take 5 further years. People are dying on the streets today. People are in precarious conditions today. I don't know if 5 years later it will deliver employment to the scale we want. And what's the result we see? Swelling up of gig workers, swelling up of domestic workers, swelling up of all kind of casual workers, which were being described here. Out of work, reserve army of labor, use whatever jargon you wish to. On the ground, people do not have work. And what India is typified today is, Professor Jha uses the term often, is pluri-workers. People who will get any opportunity, any work, they will just plunge for it, whatever precarity levels.
Right.
So,
Okay, I think,
thank
you. And I think, Priyanka, there's a question specifically for Professor Jha. Can you
Yes,
read that
ma'am.
out?
Yes, ma'am. So, do you think the Union Budget 2026 prioritizes job creation for ordinary people, or is it still mainly focused on growth through big investments and infrastructure? And what do you see the biggest strengths and biggest gap in Budget 2026? And this is by Arpit Anand, who's also from Patna, so he's sharing that he would love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, Professor Jha.
Yeah, sorry. So employment generation, livelihood generation, etc., are anathema in the current budget. No, there is no kind of even a nano second attention to any of this. Yeah, there is talk about all kinds of other things, but what will happen to employment, livelihoods, etc. I mean, there is no reference even. Forget about, and it is completely absent from the structure, the analytical structure of the budget. If at all it has any analytical structure, I tried very hard to find an analytical structure, which I could not, except simply adding a number of platitudes in some order, right? So I'm very, very pessimistic about what this budget has to even indicate vaguely about employment and livelihoods. Thank you.
Yeah. Any more questions, Priyanka?
Just one more open question, which is how can PM make India Vishwa Guru with so many people in an unsecured gig economy or contractual or part-time jobs? I think it's a comment.
It's a rhetorical question. It's a rhetorical question. I think the question itself has an answer into it.
Yes, there is an answer. And yes, you can become a leader in the battalion of Reserve Army of Labor. And that is what it is. The numbers tell the story. It's a global trend as well, but we thought we should.
If Sandeep has finished, then I will just add one sentence. There is something called employment elasticity of output. If you look at Indian economy, the standard exercise, RBI claims data, divides the Indian economy into 27 subsectors. Without fail, almost each one of these, except one or two in the recent years, where it's a forced kind of parking of people, agriculture in particular after COVID, right? What you find is per unit of growth, unit of employment generation has been going down continuously for the last 40 years. It's not only to do with last 10 years, right? It's been going down, yeah? And in the last 10 odd years, it has become almost a severe kind of problem. Of these 27 subsectors, in about 12, for every unit of output growth, there is not only reduction in employment, there is expulsion of employment.
Yes.
People are losing jobs. So the sector grows, but the total employment decreases in the net. That is the employment crisis.
Yes.
So we have to sort of, locate it in the larger macroeconomic trajectory, as I told earlier, Professor Randhir Singh Rathore, when we were talking of education, it is not one particular scheme or not one particular program, but we have to contextualize, situate it in the overall macroeconomic policy regime. Thank you.
So we are talking about job loss growth and not jobless growth. And the efflux of workers, not just from protection, for whatever minimals they've had. So, and that's the output you see in gig work, the costuming numbers, output you see in women's forced or precarious labor force participation, outputs you see in all kind of precarious workers in all kind of definitions in quest of work, in taking up 1 hour this work, 1 hour that. It's called Tory workers, or who are, as long time ago, of the wage hunters and gatherers of India.
So while agreeing with Praveen Ji and Sandeep, I want to clarify as far as ICDS scheme, the Anganwadi workers he mentioned. I remember when Murli Manohar Joshi ji was education minister and he wanted to bring an amendment in the constitution. At that time, we were saying that whatever is written there in Article 39 should be carried, that all from 0 to 14, all children should be in the schools. But they did what was brought in fundamental rights principle was from 6 onwards. And when we went and discussed with him that why you are diluting the directive principles of constitution, he said no, 1 to 6 will be taken care of ICDS, and now we are going to throw in a lots of money into that. But now we find that for year after year in the budget, the share of the state governments has been increased in the ICDS scheme. ICDS scheme continues just like that up to 6 standards. Now they are not trying. They are trying to close down even ICDS centers in a big way, and they say we will merge it in school. But we already before ICDS scheme, we already had pre-primary school system in our schools. I remember when we were students, there was a pre-primary school centers there, lower KG, within as part of the government school system. Slowly and slowly it was removed from the school system. Now these people tried to just put them against each other, the school system as well as the ICDS. So we said, okay, if you want that, then you bring ICDS to the government school system and give these women as a full-time teaching job. Don't call them volunteer, cover them in social security, give them medical benefits, cover them in ESIC. We told all that thing, but that is not their idea. Their idea is what Professor Jha was explaining about NEP. That is what we understand what this NEP means. So our workers, very clearly I want to say, the government doesn't want entitlements. Government wants to give doles for their benefits, keeping the people at that level. That's how they keep telling 80 crore people are being given ration, 80 crore people. But it is the food security scheme which you want to wind up. You are winding Manarega, and now people should not ask questions. You have already brought it that you are going to remove right to information act also. So one after another, whatever democratic rights of the people and questioning with the government is concerned, asking for accountability is concerned, all that is being stopped. When CAG came out with a report, they told the CAG, we have that notice with us. The government told them, you will not publicize any report until you take permission from us. So what is going on in this country? They want to hide whatever they are doing, they are trying to hide. But this will not be hidden because the ground reality, the results are before the people. How long they will try to do it?
Yeah, thank you very much for that last and a very pithy comment about the political economy and intentions of the government. Do we have any questions, or can we go for concluding remarks?
Ma'am, we have one last question if we can take
Okay,
that.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Dr. Rakesh from University of Hyderabad is asking that after years of limited engagement with the employment data, the government and Niti Aayog now strongly argue that inflation is under control and unemployment is minimal. Is this a new policy narrative shaped by the post-COVID context and global pressures, including developments in the US? If inflation and unemployment are said to be under control, then why do the livelihoods continue to feel stressed for many households? And how does one critique this gap between the official claims and lived realities?
Suchita, do you want me to take this up?
Yes. Go ahead. Please go ahead.
So very quickly, in fact, if you look at the last roughly 10 years or so, this problem of unemployment is something which has persisted as a pretty severe problem. There has been a minor dip in the most recent sort of, let's say, a couple of quarters and so on. So we should not take that as an indicator of an improvement on that count. In fact, the whole question of unemployment or disguised unemployment is something which is a very, very serious one. And a large number of economists who are looking at it very closely. I can mention my colleague Himanshu, for instance, from JNU, who works very, very carefully on this data, on the government data, and in fact, he has used, almost every data source which look at earnings and unemployment both, and he shows that in fact, up to the last round, PLFS 24, he finds that there is a continuous pressure. So, I don't know where Niti Aayog is getting this wisdom from. I'm a bit surprised on that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
But whatever is being created the job, now they are denying minimum wage. Indian constitution doesn't have floor level minimum wage concept,
Yes.
but our code on wages is talking about that. And surprisingly, our domestic workers were also told that they don't need minimum wage by Chief Justice himself. The issue was of domestic workers minimum wage, and he just started shouting on workers that they are not for growth. So the workers who produce, who work, who excavate, who manufacture, who give services, it came from that mouth that they are only opposed to growth. They are not for country's growth. So situation is very, very precarious, I should say. So in that condition, our women are going to suffer more. All workers will suffer,
Yes,
but
yes.
among informal economy workers, our women will suffer the worst.
On that,
Yeah, just to complete your comment on how the judges are responding, maybe we can take a look at the Shramaniti, which talks about how the workers are supposed to deliver and consider fortunate that they are getting an opportunity to serve. Okay, so that is the intent, and that is the lesson that we want to. We want to give moral sermons to workers, not to anyone else. Yeah, Chakraji, you want to say something?
no, I was just saying those observations of the Supreme Court on that
Yeah.
petition of domestic workers, which Amarjeet was speaking to. I mean, what does it tell us about the future of workers, informal workers? It tells us that whole thinking is sans class, sans an understanding of workers, and sans a total understanding of who make India, the makers of India. It can very well transfers into any other forms of workers' formations, demanding even basic employment, even what is called the wage code, or so and so forth, very basic precarious levels. Let alone the idea of dignified wage, let alone the idea of a future. So basic wage. So it tells us a story of our current sort of elite thinking, of our current upper class thinking on where we are going. And this is an ancient debate. I remember years ago, I think about a decade ago, the same debate happening within the Paschim Banga Grapracharikas Union, the domestic workers of West Bengal Union, and some of the observations of the judicial members there. How if we go open this trajectory, then these workers will create distress in middle class homes, will create problems in middle class homes, will file cases in middle class homes. This is the thinking. And this thinking, social thinking, has only crystallized further in these last decades, crystallized much further, as Professor Jha referred to. The data is 40 years in this, but has it crystallized further in the last 10? It has. I just want to say this from a perspective of the working people. I also want to sort of comment on a point made very briefly. I will comment on the climate silence. I think one of the questions or observations made in the notes, I was checking the question answer notes. I think this whole question of evaluating or evaluating, one of the expectations was, apart from the loss and damage compensations, was on celebrating, honoring, recognizing, and valuing the work of what one can call the climate and ecological justice defenders, people such as rat pickers in our cities, people who are doing so-called, local agriculture, sustainable peasant agriculture, who are not sort of relying too much to create further climate footprints. And how do we value their services, the ecosystem services concept? it hasn't come about. We saw some spark of it in 23-24 budget when one of the line items talked of mangrove workers of India and at least recognizing the mangrove workers of India for their ecosystem services, not valuing them. I think that's a pathway one expected in addition to climate loss and damage. Sort of a specific fund being set up or specific marker being set up. A simple idea that somebody who's cleaning the city and rat picking in the city should receive whatever markup wages or his or her services should be not just socially evaluated but economically evaluated and therefore compensated. Those ideas escape, and these are not some very brilliant Einstein-like ideas. These are ideas of people. These are ideas of working people. They're asking for this. Take the grid in India. This was being asked for. So what's the response? Zero. Forget even a comment. Forget even a recognition. Budget response is a far cry. Thank you.
Yeah.
All
So can I
rights
come in? Can I
sources
come in
have
there?
to be
Ji,
buried.
I just wanted to come for a minute. You mentioned about draft labor policy. We have already reacted on that and told the ministry how retrograde and regressive it is, because it talks of community work to continue. So that traditional work, this family should continue and pass it on to next generation. So the workers' children should stop dreaming to do something else. That's very clear. Secondly, smritis are mentioned.
Yes.
And then our modern laws, which we fought for almost 150 years, beginning from 19th century in colonial India and then in independent India, and got our laws. They are talking that these modern laws are archaic. But they are saying all those smritis, Manu Smriti, Narda Smriti, Yagvalkya Smriti, etc., they are the smritis which should form the basis of how labor should be treated. And that is where they are saying it is sacred duty of labor. So it doesn't talk of rights. It doesn't talk of trade unions. Monitoring will also be done by private persons or by employers. And from top to bottom, whole federal structure is under attack. So constitution's federal structure is under attack. State governments are supposed to implement what centers are. So it is a concentration of power, concentration of wealth, concentration of policies, concentration of everything in the center. In a way, India and India's unity itself is under threat.
Death of all rights.
Yeah, well, if we can conclude, well, we began with the focus on budget, but we have, of course, taken the discussion to philosophical levels of what are rights and whether what we're doing with our people. When Mr. Chachra was talking about the mangroves and rag pickers who are actually helping the ecology and environment of urban areas and semi-urban areas, I was reminded of, I think Amit Basole had, along with Dr. Santosh Mehrotra, had come up with how Manrega could be applied to urban areas. Yeah? And in which they had made a complete scheme of how it could be evaluated and how all the urban utility services could be valued at an appropriate, with an appropriate sense of justice. But of course, those a letter which Azim Premji had sent to the finance minister at some point, I don't remember the year. It is still there on my laptop. Full-fledged blueprint of the scheme was sent, but of course it was not discussed, nor did it find any place in any economic survey.
At the cost of interrupting you very briefly, actually, this economic survey devotes a chapter to the question of urban India. And it begins with a good recognition that census data is outdated ones notwithstanding, the definitions notwithstanding, through geo-tracking and other mechanisms, the urbanization in India is far higher. We can quibble about numbers, up around 50, and therefore presents huge opportunities. They do talk to some of these dimensions, of course, not as solutions, but more as identification of problems. And I was thinking to myself, if this whole thing was contextualized in the context of what we call solidarity economy, cooperatives, workers-owned enterprises, urban workers-owned enterprises in so-called green framework, which is what the text of the Azim Premji letter is, on suggesting what could be green jobs and how do we enhance urban employment through creation of green jobs. 10 years ago, we had also sent a similar kind of letter with no response. Obviously, the Azim Premji one is far more, grainy and much more grained, evolved. I think there is no solution. So I think this whole question of, can urban India create jobs of a new generation? Can it create decent jobs? Can it create people's jobs and not capital-based jobs where the profit is sucked out? Huge potentials. Just make that comment. In just sorry for interrupting, but just to add to what you were saying.
Yeah, thank you for that last bit. And can we now conclude, Priyanka?
Yes, ma'am, surely.
Yeah.
I'll now invite Heer. Can you please go ahead with the formal vote of thanks?
Oh, I
Yeah,
thought I was,
deeply
I would have liked to conclude in a certain way. Is there a time, or are we running short of time?
Surely, ma'am. Surely.
Yeah.
You can go ahead with the closing
Yeah, so
remarks.
coming back to the budget, after all this discussion on workers' rights and the democracy losing or not remaining being as effective as it should, if we come back to the budget, consumption expenditure has been a driver of GDP in India, and that it has picked up is a certainly good sign. Sluggishness of private capex had been largely attributed in the last few years to the poor household consumption expenditure, especially after demonetization and then the pandemic. What is worrisome, however, is that the household debt has also started rising. The Indian household debt to GDP ratio has been steadily increasing, and it has increased from 36% of GDP in 2021 to 41% in 2025. The household savings rate obviously is falling down, and that could limit the private investment in future. Income inequality in India is one of the largest, as some of the panelists themselves pointed out. And of course, the annual budget can do very little to iron this out. Also, taxing the super riches has never been easy anywhere in the world. But it is critical to keep upgrading the public health and education system to help the poor sustain their livelihood. A closer look at the numbers in the recent budget reveals how, in tightening the fiscal belt while pushing up the capex in the recent budgets, we have cut down on a current account expenditure. And here is what Ms. Kaur had also said. This means there's a cut in the funds allotted to ICDS, for example, and social sector in general. The present budget has allocated 0.26% of the GDP to the Ministry of Family Welfare. Education Ministry gets 0.35% of GDP, and this is not how we can really enhance the value of our demographic dividend. This, of course, is the incidental burden of laying a heavy emphasis on our glorious physical capex. There are, of course, direct cases of the burden. What are they? Rapid road construction and unscientific drilling of tunnels in the Himachal range, for example, have caused heavy landslides and loss of lives of workers as well as the local residents. Then there are instances like collapses of bridges and the airports in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities, which are closed down because of lack of demand. Such stories are not just demoralizing, they also freeze the much desired multiplier effect and the crowding in effect that our finance minister has spoken about. Lastly, underutilization of funds allotted to the states is an important area to look at, and we must see how that can be plugged in. Having said so much about the side effects of the physical infrastructure growth story that we have relied on in the last couple of budgets, since the pandemic, let me also add that being consistent in its expansion is not entirely wrong, perhaps. The demographers have pointed out growing interstate migration as an emerging story of the Indian labor markets. This is because the southern states, as Professor Rajan had pointed out, the southern states are already experiencing a rise in aging population, which means that for their economic activities, they will have to rely on the northern states, which are youth dominated in demographic terms. Good roads and faster railways are necessary to ensure these movements, better roads and freight corridors are probably good social heroic capital that could energize the directly productive activities, to use Hirschman's terminology. Lastly, may I point out that Vikasit Bharat with Sabka Vikas seems rather distant, with top 1% owning nearly 40% of national total wealth and the bottom 50% left with 15% of it. Interestingly, the World Bank's Poverty and Equity Brief has placed India in the fourth position among the world's most equal nations. And this conclusion was based on the consumption expenditure across classes. And therefore, it may actually indicate something more dangerous. What lurks behind when the consumption expenditures are less skewed than the income distributions from which the consumption comes in the first place, where the income distribution is highly skewed, is very dangerous, because lurking behind this can be only one thing: high levels of household debts as the income falls down. And that will only further exacerbate the inequality. And we need to take a cognizance of this in time. Thank you very much. I have learned a lot, and it has been a very enriching debate, enriching exchange of thoughts and ideas from people who are steeped into academics and those who have worked for the rights of workers. Thank you very much once again, Professor Arjun Kumar and the team of IMPRI, for bringing this webinar together.
Thank you, ma'am. As we conclude this panel discussion on employment, livelihoods, and the Union Budget 2026-27, I, Heer Lakhani, on behalf of IMPRI, Center for Work in Welfare, CWW, New Delhi, extend my heartfelt gratitude. Our deepest thanks to our chair and experts for today. Thank you to all our esteemed panelists for their insightful and thought provoking addresses. Your expertise and perspectives have greatly enriched today's discussion and provided us with valuable takeaways on this critical topic. We deeply appreciate your time and contributions. We also thank all the participants who joined us live, raised pertinent questions, and contributed to today's dialogue. For those watching later on our YouTube channel, listening to the podcasts, or reading our publications, we deeply value your engagement and interest. We look forward to your participation in tomorrow's Union Budget 2026-27 deliberations, which will feature three important panel discussions on rural realities and the Union Budget 2026-27, the environment and the Union Budget 2026-27, and cities, local governance, and the Union Budget 2026-27. We hope you will continue to join us for future IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning programs. Wishing you all a wonderful evening ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right.